Welcome to the second session of Follow the Crowd, Find the People Who Want to Buy Your Product. My name is Amy Jauman. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for the National Institute for Social Media. And if you are joining us after listening to the first webinar of Follow the Crowd, you learned about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of learning a little bit more about your market. Now, you can certainly jump into this webinar series at this point. You might also choose to go back and listen to the first webinar before listening to this one. Either way is a great choice, and know that the link for the first video is available in the description of this one. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about 3 data collection options. So the pieces that we're going to discuss today specifically are competitor analysis, conducting surveys, and then analytics. And we are going to talk about these at a very high level because there's actually a full course through the National Institute for Social Media where 1 week at a time we do experiential exercises and we actually go out and conduct a competitor analysis, several competitor analyses actually. We actually put together surveys on the second week. The third week we actually look at analytics and work on interpretations. That is far more information than we could cover in a webinar, and honestly, it's the kind of information that you don't want to discuss just one time, right? It's not something you look at and move on from. We put it into a full course because it is a process that you work through and review and continually update and add information to. So if you want more information on that course, the link to the course is in the video description. But let's go ahead and dig into the actual details of the content. So our first consideration are competitors. Now let's get one thing clear. What is a competitor? So for our purposes, a competitor is anyone who sells something your target market could purchase instead of what you're offering. So the reason I explain it that way is because sometimes, especially when someone is really attached to or really, really proud of the product that they're offering, they think that there is nothing in the world comparable to what they are offering. And I say that kind of jokingly, but not really. I've really had these conversations where people say, well, I don't have any direct competitors because my product is so unique, it's so amazing, it's so different from anything else. But it's pretty rare that that's the case because a competitor can be something direct. You can be talking about going to Burger King instead of going to McDonald's. But it can also be indirect. So for example, someone is looking for a relaxing afternoon. They might be looking at, oh, maybe I'll go see my massage therapist, or maybe I'll go get a pedicure. I think most people wouldn't consider those two things direct competitors, and yet for someone who is looking for a nice relaxing afternoon and they want to treat themselves, boom, there you go. You've got direct competition. So think about who your competitors might be from the standpoint of when someone goes to purchase my product or service, what might they purchase instead? And by the way, that just reminded me, you might offer a service that could be replaced by a product. So for example, if you were a speech coach and you offered these one-on-one in-person sessions, you might find that your competitor is not another speech coach, but rather an online program that claims to provide the same services, right? So, I mean, you just have to expand a little bit of what you are imagining for who your competitors might be and be open to learning about new competitors. Now, once you have your list of competitors and have kind of found a few good ones to look at, you're going to go through and answer some of these who, what, where, when, and why questions related to your competitors and what they're doing from what you can see on their kind of front-facing campaign. So everybody nowadays has a digital presence, but you might also have some insight into your competitors. You might be able to interview someone. There's a lot of ways of gathering info, but the idea with a competitor analysis isn't just to think like, oh yeah, they did this one really great campaign, or oh yeah, they screwed this one thing up, because that's more fun to think about, right? When you when you can learn from the mistakes that your competitors made. But is to systematically go through and look at what your competitors are doing and why. When you are looking at that, the other thing I advise is try to find a competitor that is as similar to you and your offering as possible when it comes to size and resources. So, for example, I think I already used a running shoe as an example, but we'll do it again. It may not be that helpful if if you're a tiny company and you manufacture a running shoe. You may not want to compare yourself to Nike because you aren't going to likely be working with the same budget. You don't have the same market presence. So even though your products are very, very similar, you have enough differences where it may not be in your best interest to use them as a comparison. Just food for thought. You may do a competitor analysis and you may actually find that you are able to learn a lot from these big fish out in the world. But just beware that they can be a little deceptive and maybe even a little depressing as well. So look for things and look for what they're doing well and look for what they're doing poorly. And if you find something you think they could have done better, take a moment to think about what you would have done differently or why. Pay attention if you're looking at social media platforms. Are they engaging with their customers? If they're engaging with their customers, are they engaging in a meaningful way? If not, why not? What kinds of things can you glean from them? And most importantly, what can you learn from your competitors? What can you mimic? And what mistakes can you avoid? Now, in our longer course, we do spend more time talking about trying to figure out who good competitors are for you to analyze, and also the importance of doing this on a routine basis. Now, it might feel lovely to do a competitor analysis once and say, I'm done, hooray, right? But that's not how it works. In today's markets, no matter what product you're selling, you have to keep checking in with the world around you. Now, some markets definitely move much faster than others, so you need to set your own timetable. Again, that's kind of part of the course. But it's really important to remember with the competitor analysis, they're keeping up with the industry as much as you are, which probably means they've got new ideas coming to light and they're doing really cool and exciting things that you can continue to learn from. So, back to our list. We talked about our competitor analysis. Let's go ahead and take a look at surveys. So when I talk about a survey, what is it that I mean? It can mean a lot of different things, and you might have different ways of surveying your audience than some of what we talk about here. It doesn't mean that the way that you're doing it isn't the best way. I'm just going to do a brief overview of kind of some of those considerations, and as I said in the longer course, we talk in much more detail about how to craft questions that get the answers that you're going for. We talk about things like survey fatigue, how to actually get people to complete your survey. There's a lot of considerations around surveys, but no matter what tool you use or how you conduct your survey, you have to choose your audience. So a few things to think about when you are asking your questions. Think about what you're trying to learn. So if you want to know about people's experiences with your product, you want to survey people who have purchased and are using your product, right? This is not a survey that you send out to the general public. So there are some obvious things like that based on what you want to learn from your survey. But another important factor here is when you're surveying people, make sure that you're getting honest feedback. And there is the not so honest feedback you get from like your mom who thinks everything you do is amazing and great, right? So you've got this inflated positive feedback, and that's lovely to hear. And I encourage you to hear that like over a nice dinner. But don't look for that kind of feedback in your surveys when you're really trying to learn about your audience. And then there's the trickier ones, right? The people that maybe are current clients and they know how hard you work, or they like you personally, or they know that you've overcome some really challenging obstacles in your life. So they're not going to be as critical of you or your product, your services, your marketing, or whatever question you're trying to answer. They're going to cut you a break because they know kind of all the behind the scenes stuff. And they aren't going to share that, yeah, it's really irritating that your newsletter is always late, or they aren't going to share that the services that you offer, you always deliver the final reports a week late. If they know you too well, they're not going to give you feedback that's going to allow you to grow. So my little warning here is to just, when you think about your audience, try to think about people that will be willing to complete your survey, but that don't know you so well or aren't so connected to you that they will be too kind to you. Which sounds horrible, right? Why would I say something like that? But trust me, you want the truth. So next, really important consideration, determine what you'd like to learn from the survey. This is really important. And I don't mean ask leading questions. So in other words, don't say, is this product the best that's in the market? Yes or no, right? Determine what you need to know means if you really want to know if it is the best in the market, you ask a question like, before you purchase this product, did you consider any other options? If yes, why did you choose, our product, blah, blah, blah? Because maybe one of the options is, well, you're my second choice, but my very first choice was out when I went to buy it. So I kind of got you by default. You want to know, right? You want to know stuff like that. You want to uncover those different things. So I was giving you an example of something you'd like to learn about being why do they choose your product, but you might want to learn a whole bunch of different things from a survey. You might want to know simple demographics. Where in the country do you live? You might want to learn gender or habits or things like that, because you might be trying to improve your marketing plan. Or you might want to learn more about the product. When you purchase our product, how did you think you would use it? How did you end up using it? In your opinion, how is our product priced? When you purchased our product, did you have any kind of a coupon or discount? What do you want to know? If you're going to go through all the trouble of surveying your audience, why? You might be surprised to know this, but I find a lot of people that do surveys because they think they're supposed to do a survey. If you don't have anything that you're trying to learn from your customers, my goodness, don't go through the hassle of putting together a survey, and certainly don't ask them to spend their precious time sharing their thoughts and opinions with you. Make that decision. Determine what you want to learn and choose wisely. So what that means is if you really want to know something specific, make sure that specific item remains front and center and it isn't influenced by the other questions on the survey. So as I mentioned, we talk a lot more about survey questions, how to write good questions, how to connect with people in a meaningful way, what the different platforms allow you to do with these survey questions, and simply how to make these choices. But there are some really basic things to consider whenever you're asking anyone questions, not the least of which is this idea of fatigue. If you put a survey together and it's 100 questions, you're going to have an abandonment rate, which is when someone begins taking your survey and then just quits because they're just like, oh my goodness, is this just never going to end? I thought I was committing to a 2-minute survey, right? You have to manage things like that. Maybe you have 3 really important questions you need to ask. If that's the case, maybe you should just ask those 3 really important questions and dump the rest of the questions in the survey, because your completion rate will go through the roof. You can say things like, hey, this survey only takes 2 minutes. You'll get more of the info you need without bogging it down with things like demographics or future purchase options, or maybe stuff that you're not interested in at the time. So think about what you want to learn and choose those questions wisely. And then you're eventually going to choose the tool that works best for you. I am a user of SurveyMonkey. I love SurveyMonkey. I have used it for years. That doesn't mean it's the best for you. It doesn't even necessarily mean it has all the functionality of what you would like to accomplish. So that's why prior to choosing your tool, you start to think about what you want to do. Now, the cool part is when you get to the point of looking at tools, you might change your mind about what you'd like to accomplish. So, for example, you might be kind of cruising through some videos, like explainer videos of how different survey tools work. And in watching those survey tools and learning about those tools, you might realize, oh my goodness, I should totally do this, that, or the other thing. That would be a great way to ask this question, or this would be great data for me to collect. Whatever the case is, be open to going back a step and kind of reformulating that setup. And then finally, craft perfect questions. So what does it mean to craft a perfect question? It means that if you need demographics, be sure to collect them. If you are surveying what people are thinking about, and you might have a marketing campaign specifically for men or for women, find out what gender people identify with at the very beginning of your survey so that you can sort that data and their answers as needed in the future and adjust your campaigns accordingly. Make questions easy to answer whenever possible. If you can do it, make it multiple choice, select from a drop-down menu, Likert scale, 1 to 5. Anything that can make it easier for them to respond to. And I will say this especially because so many of us are participating on mobile devices, and it's different than sitting at a keyboard, right? If you have to type in a long response, many people, although we are becoming more and more used to it, many people find it more taxing to respond from mobile devices if they have to type in a lot of specific data. And then we already talked about this in our first webinar video, is the importance of asking experiential questions. So instead of saying, where do you buy your books? You say, tell me about the last book that you bought. Where'd you buy it from? How'd you pick it out? How did you decide to purchase it? Did you look at the used copies versus the new copies, right? So experiential questions dig a little deeper. And instead of tapping into the answers that people might want to give, they tap into the experiences and things that people have actually done. So you get more honest answers. And this isn't because the whole world is trying to lie to you. This is simply human nature. We a lot of times want to be the person that goes out of our way to buy from the tiny little bookshop on the corner, but we actually are the person that buys from Amazon when we're standing in line at the grocery store because frankly we've got like 80 other things to do tonight and we don't have time to get to that tiny little bookstore. Whatever that looks like for your product, it doesn't matter, right? The point is we all want to know the reality of what our customers are doing, not the kind of goals and aspirations that they have that they want to be as a participant or as a customer. So experiential questions just help people be a little more honest. How do you get your survey out? So if you do an electronic survey, you might share it on social media sites. You might send it via email. I've done surveys in person, which is always fun. You kind of pull a survey up on a tablet and you just have people kind of walk around with a tablet and have people answer questions as they go. But no matter what you do, you always want to manage bias. You want to record findings. If you do, let's say, for example, go around in person, you want to make sure that you note that all those responses were from a singular event because these kinds of things they could potentially influence your results. It's a lot to keep track of. But with just kind of a few guidelines, again, we explore this in the full course in a little bit more detail. But keeping a few things in mind, you can get really solid data and you can combine, by the way, all of these survey results into one data collection process. For example, you might put the same link out on your social media sites and via email, and you might do it in person, and you might have some kind of qualifier, like people might include their email address or their name or something along those lines so that you can eliminate anybody that's a double up, even though people would probably not take your survey twice, maybe, but if you were concerned about that. But maybe you collect the same survey results in multiple ways. Remember, this is for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at analyzing our results. So if we get all this great feedback, and maybe we do some surveys in person, maybe we do some result, or we get some questions via social media, we go through and take a look way back to the beginning where we said, what did we want to learn from this survey, right? You review the questions that you were hoping to answer. Did you answer those? Did I figure out where most people are buying my product? Did I find out what that one tipping point was that made them go with my product instead of someone else's? Review the questions you were hoping to answer. Second one is remove the outliers. So if you have something like a question about price, and you say currently our product comes in at the price point of $39. How does this compare? Blah, blah, blah. And you ask that question. And you have one person who says, I can't believe you charge anything for this product. It should be free. And you have 400 people that say, yeah, that seems about right. Your person that says your product should be free is what we call an outlier. They are somebody that should not be deeply considered in your survey results. And I spend time talking about this because too many people really dwell on those outliers. And they say, oh, well, but this one guy, he sure said that we shouldn't be doing this, that, or the other thing. Well, okay, think about it for a moment. Maybe it's got some merit. Maybe this person has some inside scoop where they shine some light on something you need to take a look at, but don't spend too long on that, because if you can't find a reason why they had such an unusual answer, that's probably their deal more than yours. Go with the majority, look at the people that are responding, and look for our last bullet there, look for themes. Look for people that keep saying the same things over and over again. There is a term called interviewing to saturation, which is when you start off doing surveys, you start off doing interviews, and you don't even know how many people you're going to talk to, because you're going to interview until you keep hearing the same things over and over again and you stop getting new information. It's kind of along the same lines of looking for themes. You might have to talk to 100 people, you might have to talk to 1,000 people, but eventually you'll get to the point where you can't deny the majority of people feel a certain way. And again, with surveys, the kind of cool thing is you can slice and dice that data, where if you need to, you can take out the guys that are responding versus the women that are responding versus a certain age group that's responding versus, you can look at it in all kinds of different ways and look for themes that way. But really, truly, most importantly, the idea is to look for those patterns that are meaningful and not be distracted by the onesie-twosie kinds of responses. So our last component is the one I'll speak the least about, because it is actually kind of the most diverse in opportunities, and that's analytics. So if we look at something like Facebook analytics, like we have here, or Twitter analytics, also another great example, if you don't know what data you have access to, or if you're having trouble interpreting that data, ask for help, but know that there is so much data out there for you. If you have an existing product, if you are working on if you have an active website, if you have social media platforms, there are so many different ways to look at information. So for example, this webinar, one of the things that we will do is we will take a look and we'll see how long did people listen to each of these webinars. So it's kind of a funny thing for me to be sharing with you, right? Because now do you feel like you're part of my survey? Well, in a way you kind of are, because I'm learning how long our audience likes to listen to information. That data is available. If I go into YouTube and I look at the analytics there, one of the things that I can see is, on average, how long did people listen? How many people dropped off at what point? And I might see, well, at about the 7-minute mark, I had this huge dip in people. Why? Well, I can go back to the 7-minute mark and I can learn, right? I can see what's happening. So that's me. That's me as an educator. That's something that I can learn about my product based on analytics. You might be selling sports equipment, or you might be doing something completely different from what I have, which is going to automatically mean, of course, you have access to different pieces of information, and those pieces of information have different meaning for you than they do to me. So that is why our last consideration here is the one we spend the least amount of time on, because we do dig into it in the full course, but I couldn't not mention it in this overview because it is so important. And you might walk away from this and think, I'm not at a point where I want to do more of this market research on my own. Maybe you're just starting to learn about it. This might be enough for you to take away and maybe go talk to your web person and say, hey, can we talk about analytics? Because I think there's a lot of information out there that you probably know and you use to make my website amazing, but I might be able to use that information to make a better product or connect with my customers in a more meaningful way. Or maybe you do work with a social media strategist, or maybe you know how to access your Facebook analytics page, but you just never really spent the time to look at it and to see, well, what does it mean that this one post is so much better than all the other ones? What can I learn from that? It is taking the time, just like the competitor analysis and the surveys, to really look at the data that you've collected and see what you can learn from all of that. So again, if you want more information on the full course, you can find the link to that in the description of this course, as well as links to the other 2 free webinars. So feel free to go ahead and check those out. And otherwise, hopefully this kind of overview of different ways you could dive deeper into market research, hopefully that was helpful for you. And I look forward to connecting with you through either in the longer course or in the other 2 webinars.